In our lowest moments, it's easy to look at our faults and to blame ourselves. But let me challenge that. What if you're not broken? What if instead you're stuck in an environment that keeps breaking you? Or put it another way, before you blame your willpower, ask yourself, what kind of world are you trying to survive in? A lot of self-improvement focuses on the individual person finding the right plan, making it very specific, making it optimized, and then using the very limited willpower and resources to reach that goal. But today I'm going to introduce you to what is now called the Rat Park experiments. And one important finding from this is clear. If you change the environment, everything changes. And I want to move away from the focus on fixing yourself and instead to focus on how to redesign your surroundings so that you naturally want to show up as a healthier person. This is a grounded optimism and no extra willpower is needed. But first of all, let's have a look at what the Rat Park experiment looked like first of all. And just for context, most experiments involving rats at the time took place in little cages like this, or what are called Skinner boxes. These are based on the famous psychologist B.F. Skinner's work. They were stripped back environments to theoretically make it easier to observe changes or specific parts of the experiment. So for example, let's say a rat is given a choice between two sources of water. He just has to press this little lever here, this little green button, and he gets one of two different choices available to him. One which is typical water, which is just plain and safe, and the other one which is laced with morphine. So the question is, which choice will it make and continue to make? And the findings prove that once rats chose this morphine-laced water, it became increasingly common for them to pick that option over and over and over again, rather than going back to this safer alternative. Eventually, choosing it so often that they overdosed and died, or chose this instead of food, but again, it led towards the same end. But Bruce Alexander watched this and had a different idea. His question wasn't about the addictive substance itself, but rather the environment itself. In other words, if the same experiment was set up in a different way, with the exact same choices available, would it lead to the same conclusion? And so, Rat Park was born. Instead of a tiny cage like this, the rats had a huge area to play with, one that was 200 times bigger than the cages that they were used to. Instead of being alone, these rats had around 20 other rats to play with and to connect with. These are both male and female. They had plenty of food available to eat, basically at all times. There was plenty of natural materials like wood and shavings, rather than this metallic cage. I'm just going to put all this on here just to make it a little bit easier to see, hopefully. There was plenty of light and space. There's plenty of toys for them to play with. I've not really got a picture of a toy, so you can have a microscope. I don't know if they're really into microscopes, but that'll count for the sake of this. And places for them to exercise as well. Essentially, what happened was a peaceful little rat heaven was created. So peace was very much in the keeping with all of this. And amongst this rat heaven, though, there were still these two sources of water available. The safe water and the morphine-laced water. So that is still the same. It's exactly the same as the other experiment that we've already covered. And researchers noticed a few important findings here. That firstly, despite it being freely available, rats in Rat Park generally chose to drink the plain water. Some rats still tried the morphine water every now and again, but they showed very little preference for it, and a lot fewer signs of addiction. Secondly, in a follow-up experiment, some of these rats were forced to drink this morphine water in solitary cages for 2 months and then placed into Rat Park once they were fully addicted. And even these rats that chose to drink this plain water rather than continuing to drink this morphine water. They did still drink it intermittently, and some rats did show some signs of dependence, but it wasn't all consuming. They were still able to live like normal rats and were able to actually enjoy Rat Park, not simply being stuck right next to this morphine tap. And I will also note here, that female rats did show more of a tendency towards the morphine water across these experiments compared to the male rats, but it is a little bit beyond the scope of this particular video to go into that in more detail, given that I just want to give an overview of this topic. I just thought it was useful just to mention for those that are interested. But anyway, just to summarize this, 3 key findings are clear. Addiction isn't just about the physical substance. It's very, very strongly influenced by the social context and the environment which the subject finds itself in. And secondly, when a rat has a fulfilling life with food and water and comfort and light and space and ability to socialize and so on, the rat doesn't seek out this drug obsessively. Even though it's freely available, it's usually not chosen. And even when a rat has been forced to become addicted to a substance like this, it can learn how to overcome it and to break free of this addiction. But the big question is, why am I discussing the rat park experiments on a channel which is all based around self-discovery and inner work and learning to love reading again? Well, it's because all these findings apply to humans just as much as they do to rats. A lot of our addictions and coping mechanisms might not actually be determined by these substances or these coping mechanisms themselves. And if we can see what they are attempting to address underneath, which is the social isolation, the boredom, the anxiety, the lack of the hope for the future, then we can focus on the root causes instead. We can look at how it is that we've been adapted to a poor and an unnourishing environment, very much like these rats in these cages, rather than judging ourselves too harshly and lowering our self-esteem. I've already made 2 videos that cover these themes in different ways, which I'll link to below. One focused on coping mechanisms, the other one is focused around helping to realize our own brilliance and raise our self-esteem. But here's the key point for this so far. For the rat in the cage itself was the problem, not the rat. Separating these 2 facts is essential. And as always, I want to make this practical on a video like this. So, for you in your current life, what does your cage look like? What environmental factors can you start to look at and improve? And how can you design your surroundings to go from rat cage towards rat park, as we discussed before? You might not be able to do this all at once, but start playing with these factors and start experimenting. Let's say the equivalent of the morphine-laced water for you at the moment is social media and endless scrolling. Well, in that case, what would your environment need to look like to make that scrolling less enticing? What would need to be different in your life to make this option less relevant? And remember, the rats still had access to both types of water. It wasn't that the morphine water was banned. You don't need to stop using all technology or all phones altogether, but how to make it less appealing. Even just looking at these basics can help. The rats went from this metallic cage to one filled with wood and wood shavings and a more natural environment. Does your environment look like it is suitable for humans? I know that might seem like a strange question, but it helps to focus on these specifics that are within our control, like the light sources and the comfort and the natural materials and the actual space around us. Because a social animal, like a rat, will struggle to survive in this solitary confinement. And a human being is no different. We depend on each other to find this life of meaning. So we need to look at who we are actually in relation to others, just like these rats did. In these environments that we find ourselves in, to find fulfillment, we can't just sit in a box alone and figure it all out. We've got to do this in company. And that's the message of this lesson, is that we can actually combat these feelings of social isolation and lack of meaning and learned helplessness. Whatever your compulsions or coping mechanisms are at the moment, they don't have to define you. The rats who were completely addicted to this morphine and the cages chose to voluntarily face the effects of withdrawal and drink the plain water when they were placed into Rat Park. If you feel like something has its grip over you at the minute, just know and have faith that... Sorry, I don't know if you saw that, but my cat is just doing a mad run. He might have got onto the camera there as well. What was I saying? If you feel like... Yeah, that was it. I think if you feel like something has a grip over you at the minute, just know and have faith that it can actually be faced. And one thing that can enormously help with something like this is having a goal for the near future. An intention or a destination or a point B to focus on. Something that is future focused. Something that you can build towards and see progress being made on a frequent basis. Just seeing and experiencing that progress is intrinsically motivating enough in itself. It might be a specific health-related goal, or a fitness-based accomplishment, or a measurable career shift, or making more time for friends. It could be anything as long as it is tangible and specific and measurable and meaningful for you. You pair that with a healthier environment and you've established a lot of physical and psychological safety. It doesn't have to be a huge or ambitious goal, just something that is future focused that you think might improve your current situation, even just a little bit. This channel is focused on giving you that structure and introducing you to ideas that you might not have heard of before, as well as book recommendations to take this further still. And I haven't really spoken about or referenced the book in this particular video, but one that does come to mind is this one. It's Your Mythic Journey by Sam Keen and Anne Valley Fox. I absolutely love Sam Keen's work and his writing style anyway, but this book is essentially just a guide to help you reflect on your past and your present and your future. There's little analogies in this. There's questions, there's mini articles, there's quotes as well. And with all of this in mind, I'll also leave a link below to another research experiment based on Skinner boxes if you're interested. But otherwise, I'm aware that this lesson might be going on a little bit, so I'll see you in a future lesson. See you soon.